big new branding message. On the back is a flag. It's the United States of America flag, except something's a little bit different. All the stars are turned into ants, so it's 50 ants in the field instead of 50 stars in the field. And then it says, one nation filled with ants. We thought that was pretty cool. And it is a big goal that I have to turn my nation back into a nation of ants. Some people didn't really understand that, though. I would say about 50% of the people that came up to the booth looked at the flag or looked at the shirt and said, wow, that's just awesome. And got it right away. So about half the people, and this is a prepper expo, so you would expect a high number of people just to snap to it. I'd say about 25%, 1 out of 4, came up and said, what's the deal with that? And we said, you know the old story of the grasshopper and the ant? And they went, oh, and as soon as you said that, man, okay, I get it. Okay. About 25% of the people, so another 1 in 4, said, what ant and grasshopper? I've never heard of that story. And I absolutely was blown away. I'm not putting anybody down. I didn't know. I mean, one of the reasons that I told the story so much in the beginning of the show wasn't because I didn't think anybody ever heard it before. It was because I figured everybody had heard it before, and it was like saying, hey, just like I say when you should have food storage so that you ensure your future for food, and people go, I don't know about that, it's a little weird. And I go, do you have life insurance? And they go, yeah, okay, well, if you're insuring your life, maybe you should insure your ability to stay alive with food. So you take something very common that people accept, and you use it to help them understand something that they have resistance to that's actually a very normal thing that we've lost. So that's what I thought the ant and the grasshopper was. But I had people come by the booth, folks, and I'm not talking about teenagers. I'm talking about people in their 30s, their 40s, in their 50s. People who were in their 50s, 60s, I would say a few people, did not know the story of the ant and the grasshopper. And I sit back now and I think this is how we've turned into a nation of grasshoppers. This is how we've come so far that people don't even know the story. So I'm going to start out today's show by retelling the old story of the grasshopper and the ant in the way that my grandfather told me the story almost every week. Almost every week when I was a little kid, when we were visiting my grandparents up in Pennsylvania, we would have like Saturdays, and he'd be out there, and he was an old Ukrainian guy, and he'd be sitting out there listening to stuff on the AM radio like polka and stuff like that. And I just, I'd sit out there with him, and I really didn't dig the music or whatever, but he'd turn the music down and he'd sit me on his knee. I'm talking, I was a little guy here, 3, 4 years old, and I remember these experiences. And he would sit down and he would tell me all the old stories. Hansel and Gretel, the boy who cried wolf, Red Riding Hood, all the old stories, right? And there was, sometimes it would be this story and that story, but every week, the ant and the grasshopper was one of the stories he told me. And he would explain that the things that we did related to the story, like canning vegetables, like growing a garden, like hunting and bringing the harvest back home and storing it up. So here's the story that my grandfather told me as a young lad. The ant and the grasshopper lived in a field together. And every day they showed up kind of for their daily activities. And the ant would come out with all his ant buddies and they would start gathering up food. And they would carry the food, and they looked like they were working so hard. And they would carry the food back to their home and they would bury it down in the ground. And occasionally they would do some other activities, but most every day, the most work they did was revolving around getting what they needed for the day and getting a little bit more than they needed for that one day, so that they would have enough to get by today and they would have something for the future. And they did that every single day. And every day they would do just a little bit more than necessary to build up a storehouse down in their little anthole. Well, the grasshopper would come out to the same field every day, and he frolicked and he played and he fiddled and he just enjoyed life. And he looked at these ants toiling under the sun and says, "Are you people crazy? What are you doing over there? You guys are killing yourselves. There's no need to haul all that food away and put it in your hole in the ground. This is stupid. What are you doing? Look how much there is out here." And the ant turned to the grasshopper, and the ant says, "Grasshopper, do you not understand that these days of abundance will eventually pass? That sooner or later it's going to get very, very cold and very, very dark, and the snow and the ice are going to come. And if you don't have a place to go and you don't have something to sustain you after that happens, you're going to die. You're going to freeze to death, and you're going to starve to death." And the grasshopper said, "You're nuts. I'm going to play and I'm going to dance and I'm going to fiddle. And I'm going to eat whatever I need, and I'm not going to worry, because all I see is a field of green as far as I can see. As far as I can travel, I can find nothing but more and more green." And the ant said, "When it happens, don't come to us. We only have enough for our own family." And then the summer started to come to an end and fall came and the air was crisp and cool and a lot of the grass started to turn brown and go away, but there was still plenty to eat. And the ant said, "Grasshopper, time is almost up. Please take responsibility for yourself." And the grasshopper said, This weather's great, man. What are you talking about? This is beautiful. I don't need to worry about this." And then one day the dark clouds came. And the first flakes of snow began to fall, and the grasshopper began to shiver, and he began to try to warm himself, and he tried to look for a place to hide from the snow, and then the snow got heavier. And there was still some grass, so he would run around in between the snowflakes and eat a little bit of grass, and then the snow came heavy, and all the grass was covered in snow. And in the field of white snow, there was a green grasshopper freezing to death. And he thought, "I know, I'll go to the ants, they have food." But when he knocked on the ants' door, they didn't come out. And he stays out in the snow, and the grasshopper dies. Now that's the original story with some embellishments by me and some by my grandfather, and where the two disconnect, I don't remember anymore. But that's the basic fable from a dude named Aesop that wrote these fables to teach morality lessons a long, long time ago. And you can look up all the fables of Aesop, and you can find out that a lot of the modern stories that we tell today actually go back to there, and are either versions of them or the exact story or somebody twisting one and make it a little different. Well, what happened not so long ago is people decided that the grasshopper dying was too traumatic for our children to hear. So Disney and other people made new versions where the grasshopper went, "Oh, Mr. Ant, help me." And the ant came out and said, "Oh, I'm sorry to see you like this. Come on in, buddy." And he shared a little bit, and the grasshopper got through winter and learned his lesson. Well, we're robbing our children when we tell them that story, folks. It's not the nature of a grasshopper to change. Grasshoppers are grasshoppers. They die every winter. Ants are ants. They prepare for winter. That's why the story exists in the first place. So if you're gonna tell your children the story, please tell them the truth. Tell them what really happened. Let me tell you what really happens to grasshoppers in a world of ants. When the grasshopper, long before the snow flies, the grasshopper dies, and then the ants cut him up in little pieces and take him home for food. That's what really happens to the grasshoppers, because ants eat grasshoppers. Now, I don't know if you need to tell your kids that bluntly, but the grasshopper needs to die in the story or the lesson's not learned. Because we are human beings. So when I say you could be an ant or you can be a grasshopper, it's by choice. We are not by nature an ant or a grasshopper. We're simply emulating the behavior of either one. And we have a human intellect and an ability to choose. So the human that's acting like a grasshopper can turn into an ant. And I hope that more of you will. But an actual grasshopper in the story, by his very nature, it's what his place in nature is. And Aesop didn't tell the story so that people would feel sorry for the grasshopper. He told the story so people would learn from nature. And that's what we need to do if we want to tell our kids about this.